Bavarian politics of the early 1920s were a particularly violent subculture of the larger German political scene and revolved around meetings in Munich's famous beer halls. Fueled by strong beer and fiery rhetoric, bloody street fights between rival groups were common. The Nazi Party was in the thick of this maelstrom. To take the fight to his communist rivals, in 1921, Hitler organized a party militia dubbed the Sturmabteilung, literally Storm Detachment, or SA. It was under the command of a former army captain, Ernst Röhm. Soon nicknamed the Brown Shirts because of their distinctive uniforms, SA stormtroopers were in the thick of riots and other trouble. Hitler also moved to set up a new ultra-loyal paramilitary group that would have the job of protecting him and other senior Nazi leaders. Since many SA members were former Freikorps, he needed men who would give him unquestioning loyalty. In March 1923, he set up the Stabsschwach. The group was reorganized as the Stoßtrupp, or shock troop, Adolf Hitler. The group's distinctive black uniforms soon became a feature of Nazi Party meetings, and its members were always ready to do their master's bidding. At this point, Hitler's bodyguards never numbered more than a few dozen men. By early November 1923, Hitler was convinced that the Weimar Republic was on the verge of collapse, and he declared that the Nazi Party was to lead a march on Berlin to overthrow Germany's government of Jewish Marxist traitors. The first stage of the Nazi Revolution would take place in Munich, where Hitler and the SA planned to depose the Bavarian state government and win over local army units to their cause. After a rabble-rousing speech in a beer hall from their leader, Hitler's supporters spread out through the city with the intention of seizing key buildings. This resulted in the coup d'etat attempt being dubbed the Beer Hall Putsch. The small Stoßtrupp Adolf Hitler was given the task of ransacking the offices of the Social Democratic Munich Post newspaper. In the meantime, Hitler and the main column of Nazis headed for the Bavarian War Ministry building. Unfortunately for Hitler, he had misjudged the mood of the country, which was now starting to recover from the post-war chaos. The army soldiers outside the ministry stood their ground and opened fire on the Nazi plotters. Some 16 Nazis were killed in the confusion, and Hitler dislocated his shoulder as he dived for cover. The putsch ended in fiasco. Hitler and several other plotters were arrested. During the 13 months he served of his 5-year sentence in Landsberg prison for conspiracy to commit treason, Hitler's bodyguard was disbanded. The period of imprisonment did nothing to dampen Hitler's quest for power. Rather, he emerged from jail with a long-term plan to achieve his aims. Germany was now a more prosperous and stable place, so Hitler's apocalyptic vision of future struggles had to be tempered. He now talked about using legal methods to gain power and tried to portray himself as a normal, constitutional politician. Squad. This title was quickly abbreviated to SS, creating the infamous name. Because of their distinctive black uniforms, they were soon nicknamed the Black Guard, or Black Order. Their uniforms were adorned with the letters SS, stylized as distinctive Nordic runes. For the next 4 years, the SS was a small, elite group of bodyguards that traveled with Hitler wherever he went. They were initially volunteers who did their security work in the evenings or on weekends. Only a small number of the 300 or so SS men were full-time and on the Nazi Party payroll. As Hitler moved to establish the Nazi Party as a national body outside of his Bavarian power base, the SS was expanded, and small detachments were set up in every major German city to protect local leaders and party meetings. The SS was deliberately kept small so its total loyalty to Hitler could be assured. Already, Hitler was growing suspicious of Röhm and the SA because their hot-headed behavior was threatening his attempts to rebrand the Nazi Party as a respectable political force. In January 1929, Hitler appointed a chicken farmer, Heinrich Himmler, as head of the SS, with the blessing to build it up as a force to rival the SA. Even though the SS was nominally part of Rome's force, Himmler was totally loyal to Hitler and threw himself into expanding his new fiefdom. Over the next 4 years, he expanded the SS to some 52,000 men, which not only included bodyguards, but also a covert secret intelligence organization called the Sicherheitsdienst, translated as the Security Service, or SD. Loyalty to Hitler was at the core of the SS ethos. The expanded SS organization was essentially a shadow internal security apparatus, which would help the Nazis gain and keep power in Germany. Events across the Atlantic soon intervened to change the fortunes of Hitler and his Nazi Party. The Wall Street stock market crash of October and November 1929 rapidly sent ripples of economic crisis around the world. Germany's fragile recovery was stopped in its tracks. Millions were soon unemployed, and the value of Germany's currency went through the floor. There were 1.6 million unemployed in October 1929. By February 1932, this figure had increased to 6.12 million. The Great Depression gave Hitler the chance he was looking for, and again, he portrayed himself as Germany's new messiah. From having only 12 seats in the Reichstag, the German parliament, in 1928, the Nazis managed to win 107 seats and 6 million votes in the 1930 election. Over the next 3 years, as Germany's economic crisis worsened, the Nazi Party's vote increased, as did the votes going to the communists. Squeezed from left and right, the center parties found themselves unable to form governments without the support of either of the political extremes. Governments lasted only a few months, preventing the implementation of the necessary measures to restore the economy. Germany's democracy was locked into a spiral of economic and political decline. By the middle of 1932, the Nazis were the largest party in the Reichstag. Even though they did not have the necessary majority of seats to allow them to form a government, they held the balance of power, and Hitler was now a key power broker. For 6 months, Germany was in political turmoil as the aging President Paul von Hindenburg tried to form a government that excluded Hitler. The former field marshal despised Hitler because of his lowly Austrian birth. In January 1933, Hindenburg bowed to the inevitable and appointed Hitler as Germany's chancellor. Hitler was the leader of a coalition with other right-wing parties, which represented big business interests. Over the next year, Hitler moved systematically to consolidate his grip on power and eventually appointed himself Germany's Führer with unlimited dictatorial powers. The SS played a key role in this move to dictatorship. Once in control of the levers of political power, Hitler moved to put his loyal lieutenants into key positions of influence. Himmler was made police chief in Munich. The SS was also authorized to act as an official police unit, alongside established state police forces. Money from the Interior Ministry budget was diverted to pay for the SS expansion. Now, many of the part-time SS men could become full-time employees of the German state. SS units around the country were established on a permanent basis with battalions or political readiness squads being set up in every major city for so-called heavy police tasks. These were, in effect, paramilitary squads, which owed their loyalty directly to Hitler. The SA organization by the end of 1933 had mushroomed to 3 million men, and Hitler was looking for ways to bring it under his control. A crucial development was the setting up in Berlin in March 1933 of a new elite grouping within the SS, under the command of one of Hitler's old henchmen from Munich. Josef Sepp Dietrich was an old party crony of Hitler, whom he trusted implicitly. The new group was initially only 120 men strong, and was dubbed the SS Stabswache Berlin. Its job was to guard Hitler and his official residence in the Reich Chancellery. In September 1933, it became the SS Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, or SS Bodyguard Regiment Adolf Hitler. And in November that year, members of this new Life Guard swore an oath of loyalty unto death to their new Führer. Under the leadership of Dietrich, the Leibstandarte would later rise to be Germany's premier armored division. However, in its early days, the unit would gain infamy for its role in one of Hitler's first extra-legal acts as he moved to establish his dictatorship. By June 1934, Hitler had outwitted most political opponents, banned all parties except for the Nazis, and placed his supporters in key positions in the German government. The SA remained the last bastion of potential opposition to Hitler, and he was soon to neutralize this threat. He had decided to remove the socialist elements from the party. Hitler carefully concocted a bogus coup plot involving Röhm and other SA leaders. Orders were issued for the plotters to be arrested. The Leibstandarte and SS units provided the force for the operation. Hitler himself led the raid in Munich that caught Röhm and several of his key lieutenants. Sepp Dietrich then oversaw their execution in Stadelheim prison by a Leibstandarte firing squad. A rising SS star, Theodor Eicke, the inspector of concentration camps, shot Röhm after he refused to commit suicide. In Berlin, other SS units arrested some 150 SA leaders. They were then shot 4 at a time by a Leibstandarte firing squad in Berlin's Lichterfelde barracks. The total number of people killed in the so-called Blood Purge, or Night of the Long Knives, is still unclear, but it was probably nearly 200. Most were SA cronies of Röhm, but some were leading political opponents of Hitler, such as General Kurt von Schleicher, the last chancellor of the Weimar Republic. The audacious nature of the killings and the lack of response from Hindenburg confirmed Hitler's place as the supreme political power in Germany. Within weeks, the president was dead, and Hitler assumed the powers of his office. He declared himself to be the German Führer. He then forced army officers to take an oath of loyalty to him rather than to the German Constitution. Hitler removed the SS from control of the SA as a reward for their loyalty. Wehrmacht would be Germany's sole arms bearer. This was in return for their support during the Blood Purge against the SA. The armed SS units were used for special internal tasks allotted by the Führer. The SS was described as a militarized force ready for police action within the Reich boundaries when dissident forces are too strong for the normal security services. Hitler was keen to provide the new SSVT with the best training and weapons, so he persuaded a number of ambitious army officers to transfer to the new force to provide a corps of professional officers. Hausser was also in charge of the first SS officer cadet, or Junker School, at Bad Tölz, which was set up in 1935 to train a new type of SS officer. Bad Tölz and a second Junkerschule at Braunschweig turned out a generation of aggressive officers that would rise to command the SS armored divisions during World War II. At the same time as the SSVT was set up, Himmler also established a rival branch, eventually dubbed the SS Totenkopfverbände, SSTV, or Death's Head units. This branch was the responsibility of the head of the concentration camp guard force, Eicke, who set up the first of these infamous camps at Dachau, outside Munich, in 1933. By early 1938, in addition to guarding a string of prison camps around Germany, which held thousands of inmates in poor conditions, the SSTV mustered 3 regiments of fully motorized troops equipped with light weapons. The Oberbayern Regiment was based at Dachau in Bavaria. The Brandenburg Regiment operated from Oranienburg concentration camp outside Berlin, and the Thüringen Regiment ran the Buchenwald camp near Weimar. It was intended that they would reinforce the SSVT troops in times of crisis. But this arrangement also allowed Himmler and Hitler to pit rival SS officers against each other. Eicke was a brutal thug who showed no pity toward the inmates of his camps. He indoctrinated his men to believe they were responsible for imprisoning Germany's most dangerous enemies and instructed them to show no mercy. The most minor infringements of his camp rules were to be dealt with by severe beatings and other forms of torture. This period also saw Himmler move to spread the tentacles of the SS into every sphere of German life. In June 1936, Hitler designated Himmler as head of the unified German police system, as well as head or Reichsführer of the SS and chief of the secret police, the infamous Geheimstaatspolizei, or Gestapo. In this capacity, the SS became responsible for all the apparatus of the Nazi police state. Its members were now the masters of terror in Hitler's Germany. By 1939, all the security police organizations of Hitler's Third Reich were brought under the control of Himmler's loyal henchman, Reinhard Heydrich, via the Reich Central Security Office. This included the SD, the Gestapo, the ordinary criminal police, and security police. Heydrich epitomized the Nazi police state. He was ambitious, ruthless, and totally loyal to Hitler. There was also the German Racial Assistance Office, which was charged with protecting the well-being of ethnic Germans living outside the borders of the Reich. These groups then helped in the establishment of the Reich Office for the Consolidation of the German Nationhood, which was nominally responsible for the movement of ethnic Germans back into Reich territory. But it was really a cover for the deportation and eventual extermination of Jews, Slavs, and other groups considered Untermenschen, or subhumans, by Hitler. It finally spawned the SS Economic and Administrative Central Office, which was in charge of the concentration camp system and the final solution of the Jewish problem. The leaders of these organizations developed bland euphemisms for the mass murder of most of Europe's Jews. By the end of the 1930s, the SS organization had ballooned to some 200,000 men, of whom the vast majorities were in its police, security, and concentration camp guard units rather than in the SSVT. During this period, the SS became central to Hitler's folk myth, with senior figures in the organization being portrayed as Nordic gods in Nazi propaganda. The racial purity of SS recruits was given great prominence, and Hitler tried to build on this as a way to indoctrinate the German people with his theories of racial superiority. The SS also had its own rank system that gave members prestige and power over ordinary mortals in the army, the Nazi Party, and in civilian branches of government. The growth of the armed SS during the later years of the 1930s was one of slow evolution. Much of the groundwork for the development. Hitler was still unwilling to stage an open confrontation with the Army's generals and preferred to dispose of problematic commanders in a series of dirty tricks operations to discredit individuals who opposed him. The early development of the armed SS was characterized by a series of deals with the Army High Command. In May 1935, joining the armed SS was classified as military service, and it exempted the SS recruit from being conscripted into the Army. At the same time, however, the Army retained control of the flow of new manpower into the control of military aspects of SS training, and had the right to inspect SSVT units. To get around these restrictions, Himmler allowed the Totenkopfbande to mushroom into a force of some 25,000 men by 1939. He groomed the concentration camp guards to become almost a ghost reserve for the SSVT. He stretched its role as a force for special tasks of a police nature to the limit. Because it had no formal military role, the Army could not claim any right to interfere in its affairs. Totenkopfbande units were fully motorized, had heavy machine guns, and other light weapons. Plans were drawn up so SS police reservists aged over 45 could be quickly mobilized to guard the concentration camps. This released the Totenkopfverband motorized regiments for combat duties. While on paper, Eicke's private army seemed a powerful and heavily armed force, in reality it did not undertake intense combat training. It was nowhere near the quality of the mainstream armed units of the SSVT. During the invasion of Poland and France, for example, its lack of military skills would become very apparent. Over the next 3 years, a tug of war took place as the Army tried to strangle the SSVT at birth. The effort was to little avail, as the growth of the elite force had the personal backing of Hitler. In 1938, he issued instructions codifying the role of the SSVT. It was to be a permanent armed force at his disposal and a formation of the Nazi Party recruited and trained in ideological and political matters by the Reichsfuhrer SS in accordance with directives given by Hitler. In case of an emergency, it was to be used by the Commander-in-Chief of the Army within the framework of the Army, subject to military law and instruction. Politically, though, the armed SS was to remain part of the Nazi Party, even if Army commanders had operational control in the field. Ultimately, Hitler envisioned the armed SS as being an armed state police that was to enforce the authority of the Reich in the interior of the country. He declared that this duty can only be carried out by a state police containing within its ranks men of the best German blood and identified unquestionably with the ideology upon which the Greater German Reich is founded. Only a formation constituted upon these lines will be able to resist subversive influences in times of crisis. After the setting up of the SSVT units, a frantic effort began to train the new formations in military skills. While they were already drilled in the use of small arms, they were lacking in expertise in military tactics. Hitler insisted that the new force be fully motorized, in line with his view that his elite troops had to have the best equipment available. To speed up the process of training, each armed SS unit was twinned with a local army unit to allow it to share experience and conduct joint training. Relations between the two organizations were frosty at first, but improved as armed SS and Army units participated in joint operations during the reoccupation of the Rhineland in 1936 and the union with Austria in 1938. The armed SS, however, retained control over the selection of its recruits, their ideological training, and their transformation into true Aryan warriors, soldiers who would be the vanguard of National Socialism. Hitler saw his SS troops as Aryan supermen who would lead the racial struggle with the Untermenschen. To judge morality properly, it must be replaced by two concepts borrowed from zoology: the taming of a beast and the breeding of a species, wrote Hitler. The SS man must be hard, unemotional, fiercely loyal. The SS man's basic attitude must be that of a fighter for fighting's sake. He must be unquestionably obedient and become emotionally hard. He must have contempt for all racial inferiors and for those who do not belong to the order. He must feel the strongest bonds of comradeship with those who do belong, particularly his fellow soldiers, and he must think nothing impossible. Even before recruits were allowed to begin training, they had to pass rigorous racial and physical selection. Himmler insisted that potential SS soldiers had to be aged between 17 and 22. Armed SS commanders wanted their men to be supple, adaptable soldiers, athletic of bearing, capable of more than average endurance on the march and in combat, and to be as much at home on the battlefield as on the athletic field. Recruits were roused from their beds at 0600 hours each morning. They were subjected to extensive physical training to toughen them up so that eventually they could have to parade in public in Berlin. The final ingredient of SS training was ideological indoctrination. This was to ensure that recruits were fully prepared to be foot soldiers in the coming war for racial supremacy against the Untermenschen. National staff officers, such as Hauser, to set up the SSVT Inspectorate, helped improve the quality of the armed SS's higher echelons. There was still, however, a big skills gap at the junior and middle ranking level. Only SS men who had served 2 years in